When I first started my army service, I was drafted to pilot course. And I remember at one of the Saturdays sitting outside of the tents with a good friend of mine. And he told me, Rotem, you're so lucky to be born in those days. And I looked at him quite surprised, didn't understand really what he was saying. He told me, 100 or 200 years ago, women couldn't vote, women couldn't get education, couldn't have their own money. And look, today, women could be pilots. How amazing is that? And I remember myself sitting there and thinking, wow, I am really lucky. But it took a few years for me to grow up and to understand that the world is still not as equal as I thought it would. And by looking at the parliament or women in boards or the salary differences, we can see we still have quite a lot of way to go through. But today, I don't want to talk about those glass ceilings. I want to talk about the glass ceilings that we as women put to ourselves. So nice to meet you, and I'm happy to be here today. My name is Rotem Shavit, and I'm the CEO of Talkmasters, School for Lectures and Public Speaking. And I remember when I first started giving courses in public speaking, I remember women doctors who had really hard time saying that they're doctors. And that most of the time when I see women in our courses need to speak, they open up, you know how? Right, apologizing. And also many times when I ask someone to volunteer to practice speaking, most of the times men would be the first to stand up and talk. So I decided to do this lecture and to talk to you today about how we can start talking better. So on the first part, I want to break some myth and give you some interesting information to think about. And on the second part, I want to talk about how to do it better. If you open up the book 100 Best Speeches of the History, you probably wouldn't see many women there. So I brought to you today 3 very interesting and very successful women, so to listen to their speeches and to see what we can learn in order to talk better in our lives. When I ask in my lectures, what's the difference between men who speak and women who speak? Most of the times, the first answer people answer, and especially women, is that women are drilling. And I remember a few years ago opening up a news website and reading this article about this British scientist, the author of the bestseller book, The Feminine Brain, that said in her research, she found that women speak 20,000 words a day, while men only speak 7,000 words a day. And I remember thinking, wow, that's interesting. Women speak 3 times as much as men. Maybe it's because we need to explain men everything 3 times. Makes sense, right? But actually, this research was refuted. And the truth is that women and men both speak 16,000 words a day. And the difference they found in this research was only in different professions. There are professions that speak more words than other professions, but both men and women speak the same amount of words, so just so you know. But I do think we sometimes drill in our own brain. Rashema Saunjani, the founder of Girls Who Code, in her TED Talk, she tells a really interesting story. She said that her friend, who is a professor in the Columbia University and teaches the course of Intro to Java, told her that we noticed something really strange. He noticed that when male students come to him with a problem, they usually said, "Professor, there's something wrong with my code." Whereas female students come to him, they usually say, "Professor, there's something wrong with me." And there's other researchers that show that when men succeed, they usually think to themselves, wow, I'm so talented, I'm great, I'm smart, I rock. Where they fail, men would usually think, well, the test was too hard, the professor didn't like me, I didn't study with the right friend, and something in the environment outside of them was the reason for the failure. While as women, we usually do the opposite thing. When we succeed, we usually think it's something else. I learned with the right friend that helped me, the teacher liked me, There were no other competitor for this job. When we fail, we usually think, well, I'm not smart, I'm not talented, I'm stupid. And it's not something we were born with. It's something that many years in our society taught us to think. And I tell you this today in order for you to start thinking about that the next time you succeed or fail. Start celebrating our success and thinking again about our failure. Is it an opportunity to learn and to grow? Or in other words, let's start to change our story. Maybe we could put a question mark on the times that we think we did it bad, or we can try to do things we're not used to do and get better. Many times we tell ourselves there are things we're not good at. We can't do it at all. And I want to tell you a short story about a time I decided to change my story. For many years, I've been telling myself I'm not funny. I'm the eldest at my family. As eldest, I'm the responsible one. I'm the one that takes the entire world on my shoulder. And I have two young sisters who are very funny. Every family gathering, they're the one that do the laughs. And when I became a lecturer a few years ago, started to give lectures and talks, I realized that humor is a very important tool for my toolbox. And using humor is very important in order to grab my audience attention. But I kept on telling myself, what can I do? I'm not funny. I wasn't born funny. So one day I decided to change this story that I've been telling myself for years. I went to learn how to stand up. I went to this stand-up club, and for 10 weeks I came there every week to stand on the stage for 5 minutes and to do a stand-up comedy. And I can tell you it was the frightest stage I've ever talked in front of. And I've been talking to thousands of people in much bigger stages before, but there in this small club in front of 15 or 20 people who we gathered from the street begging them to come to listen to us, it was the most frightening stage I have ever stood on. And I learned so much from this experience. I learned that sometimes when we tell ourselves again and again, I can't do that, or I'm not good at that, we start to act that way. And when we start putting this question mark and thinking maybe I could get better, then that's the beginning to really getting better in that. I want to give you a few other researches. One is there's only 15% of speakers in biology conferences who were examining this research were women. But I think what's more interesting about this research, and of course in other science fields the situation is quite the same. What's interesting, or even another thing to look at on this research, is that it wasn't that women wasn't invited to talk on those conferences. They were, but many of them refused. Only 26% of the men said no and refused to come and speak, while 50% of the women that were invited to those conferences said no. And it doesn't matter if the reason is excellent. If there's not enough budget, or there's too much invitation, or something in the workplace, could be excellent reason to say no. But when we say no, when we refuse to go on stage and speak and to talk on those conferences, we lose many opportunities. We don't get acknowledged. We don't get the exposure we could. We don't get the opportunities that we could win in our career. And another important thing to think about is that we never know who is listening to us. We can never know who is sitting in the audience and what door it might open to us. When we go on stage, maybe in the audience there's our next business partner, or an investor that could invest in our project, or maybe even our next date. In the audience, maybe there's a great opportunity, and when we don't go on stage, we don't know what we miss. When I was in the army, at the beginning of my army, I told you I've been in pilot course, but there was a slight problem. And the problem is that I have this horrible fear of heights. And I realized it's a very big problem a few months into the course when they told us we're going to do a parachute jump. So they took us to this place, and before the parachute jump, there was a full week of practicing toward this jump. And I remember one morning, the instructor came to us and said, guys, today we're going to do the Eichmann. What is the Eichmann, you probably think? And Eichmann is the tower, about 15-meter high. You need to climb on, buckle up, and jump. But it's not enough. I have this horrible fear of height. They called it by that horrible name. So I started climbing up this ladder, and every single step of the ladder that I climbed, I remember myself shivering and shaking and barely breathing. And I remember my heart pounding stronger and stronger. Every step of the ladder I was getting up. And I got to this end of this tower, and I looked down, and I saw this height, and I was so terrified. Look, I have evidence for that. If you didn't believe me, I was really terrified. And I was thinking to myself, well, Rotem, why are you doing this to yourself? And I was looking down there, seeing some other people looking to me in this look, you know, maybe you experienced this look of, why are you doing such a big deal? Come on, jump already. What would you do? Would you jump? Well, at that moment, I did the only thing I felt I could do. I closed my eyes really, really strong and jumped. If you can't see, I even zoom in. I closed my eyes so hard, I think they got to the brain. But I'm showing you these hard to watch photos because a few days after those photos were taken, I actually jumped off a plane, or maybe pushed, I don't know. But I did the thing I couldn't believe I could do. And I remember, even before getting to the ground, I got off the plane and I saw this beautiful scenery around me. And I thought to myself, how could it be? How could it be for this whole week for me to be so afraid, so scared of this moment? And now that it's happened, it's so unbelievably amazing. I felt awesome. And I didn't understand how could it be that I was so afraid of this thing. It got me to think really hard about fears. I went to study psychology in my BA because I was so into fears. What are fears? Every one of us have fears. There's no single human being that doesn't have fears, right? A fear is just the alarm mechanism our body has. When we used to go out in the savannah thousands of years ago, see this lion, instead of going petting it, our body tells us, don't do it. It's something, it's danger, fight, flight, you know all of that. But today, most of our fears are not life-threatening. Most of our fears today are stories. Really good stories that we tell ourselves, and then we live by them because we don't want to find out that we were wrong, right? Especially if we're Israelis. So we prevent ourselves from doing a lot of things because we give in to our fears. And I decided I'm going to change my relationship with fears. I realized that most of the times we don't have fears, right? When we go to work, when we're in our day-to-day life, we start feeling those butterflies when we have an opportunity to grow. I started to see that every time I'm doing something that takes me out of my comfort zone, that challenge me, that enables me to grow, that's the time I start to feel afraid. Like this talk today in English and recorded, something I don't do every day. And I was very afraid before starting to talk to you today. But I know that when I'm feeling those emotions, it means I have an opportunity to grow, to do something new, to do something better. And maybe because of that, I got to deal every day with number one fear in the world. You know probably what it is, right? It's stage fright. Fear of public speaking. They say about 75% of the people have fear of public speaking. And I say 25% of the people are lying. because we don't have to have the audience of 1,000 people in order to feel this fear. It sometimes can be even one person, a very important person, an interview, a boss, something important in our life that can make us feel that way. And I remember in this picture, it's me in front of 15,000 people. That was very frightening. But every time I'm doing such a thing and I'm still afraid, I know it's an opportunity to grow. So when I get an opportunity, instead of saying no, first of all, I say yes. I close up my eyes and jump. And I want to invite you to do the same. Close up your eyes and say yes. Just jump. And later on, see how we can do it. And I'll give you a few interesting tips in order to do it in the best way. But the first step is to say yes. And 2 questions I ask myself to help me when I feel this fear. The first time is, what is the worst case scenario? What is the most horrible thing that could happen if I'll do it? Maybe I won't get the job, maybe I won't get accepted, maybe someone wouldn't like what I said. But usually when I start to think about what's the worst case scenario, it gets a bit smaller than the big story I have in my head. And the second question I ask myself is, what could I miss out? And this is even a more important question. What could I miss out if I skip this opportunity? What interesting opportunities, what new doors could be opened up to me if I'll do it, if I'll try? So you could try using those 2 questions, and I hope it will help you too as much as it helps me. In the second part of this lecture, I want to welcome 3 amazing women. As I told you, if you open up the book, The 100 Greatest Speeches in History, you probably wouldn't find too many speeches given by women. So today I want us to watch short parts of 3 short speeches, and to see what we could also learn from those women in order to speak better. After we say yes, after we start speaking as much as possible, and it doesn't have to be only in conferences, it could be in meetings and small opportunities in order to get better. So our first guest for today is Hillary Clinton. Hillary, in the Texas conference, the interview asked her quite a hard question. He asked her, what is the most difficult test you had in your life? Let's see what she answered.
Well, I think everybody here knows I've lived through some crises and some challenging moments in my life, and I am grateful for the support and the prayers of countless Americans. But people often ask me, how do you do it?
So what can we learn from Hillary? First of all, not every question we've been asked in an interview we must exactly answer. She uses self-humor. Instead of starting to talk about Monica Lewinsky and all the fuss and all the things about that would make it a horrible interview, she uses self-humor by saying, well, you know, I've been through some crisis in my life. The audience laughs and everyone feels good. But then she takes this opportunity to talk and gives the messages she wants to talk about. She says something very interesting. She's saying there's countless Americans praying for me. And also she's saying, many people ask me, how do you do it? What do we understand by those 2 sentences? That there's many people that think she's great. She could be a great president. She's awesome. She's talented. But if she would come and say, I'm great, I could be a great president, we wouldn't really like to hear that. But when we hear that other people say it, it becomes much more objective. We believe her. It's like going in a website and reading the reviews of other people. They seem so much more objective than reading something that the owner of the website would write. That's why we want to read reviews. So saying, other people tell me, or someone told me the project I did was so great, or saying people ask me about this and that, is a much better way, much modest way. And instead of bragging and praising ourselves, we give other people to say things about us. Another way to do it is talk about the facts. Instead about talking about our qualities, talk about the facts. Talk about the projects we've been through, we done, the volunteering we did, the diploma or the achievements as facts, as how many people, what we did, was the consequences. And that helps us to talk about ourselves and to let people know how good we are, but not by bragging, but rather in a much more modest way. Or as Golda Meir, Golda Meir once said, "Don't be modest, you're not that great." And so if she said so, we must start talking about ourselves, but doing it in a modest way. The last one I want you to hear today is Malala Yousafzai. Malala Yousafzai is the youngest one ever to receive a Nobel Peace Prize for talking about human rights, women's rights, and the women's right for education. So let's see what she talked about in her small part of her speech in the UN Convention.
I had two options. One was to remain silent and wait to be killed. And the second was to speak up and then be killed. I chose the second one. I decided to speak up.
So what can we learn from Malala? And she's only 16 in this speech. First of all, the use of pause. Many of us, when we try to talk and we need to think about what we want to say and we didn't practice enough usually, or we just need to take some time to think, we use filler words. Instead, try to take a pause. The filler words take the attention to decrease the attention of the audience, and the pause increase the attention of the audience, makes our sentences stronger, more dramatic. So try, instead of giving a pause. Another thing that she does very well is repetition of the important message. Try to repeat a few times the most important sentence, the most important words, the most important messages you want the audience to remember. If you repeat it a few times in your talk or in your presentation, you'll give a better chances that they will remember it and take it with them. Another thing is, of course, she did prepare a lot for this speech. It wasn't something she made up on the spot, as you can probably hear. And preparation for our talks, for our presentation, is one of the most important things we should do, especially if it's an important occasion. Or as they say, fail to prepare or prepare to fail. Try to prepare as much as possible. Say yes for the opportunity and then go and prepare again and again. The outcomes would be much better and your fears would be much smaller. And the last thing she does is she's so authentic. It's something we can't fake. She really speaks about something she believes in. Sometimes people ask me what to do with the hands, what to do with the eyes. And I say, talk about something you believe in. Talk about something that excites you. When we talk about that, all our body language and everything we say with the spark in the eye just go out to the audience and becomes so authentic. Or as Maya Angelou once said, and with that I want to finish up today, people will forget what you said. People would forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So say yes. Close your eyes and jump if you need to, but say yes. Start speaking up as much as possible and prepare and talk from your heart. Thank you very much.